Thank you very much. Good evening, everybody. Can you hear me okay? I'm not interrupting your dinner? Okay. I do a fair bit of traveling across Canada, as you can gather, about 200 seminars across the year to consumer groups and advisor groups and trade associations and that sort of thing. So I do spend my fair bit of time in planes, trains, and automobiles. Usually not with John Candy. I usually do that by myself. And I generally have a story or two to tell about my latest adventure, or typically misadventure. In this particular case, though, I do want to share with you a little story of an associate of mine, Chris Martin over there, who did a little bit of traveling recently. And on one particular flight over the summertime, a woman sits right next to him. He's in the plane first. Lady says, I think I'm sitting next to you. And so he gets out of the way. She sits next to him. She's quite an attractive lady. And ever the charmer, Chris turns to her and says, wow, did the airline want to charge you extra to sit next to a good-looking man? And she answered, yes, they did, but I wasn't prepared to pay. You know, a lot of what we go through in life, whether we're dealing with a financial services organization or we're dealing with a retail store or whatever, is based on value, or what I call perceived value anyway. And of course, I think we all understand, for those of us that are in business anyway, that in business, perception is reality. So I was cleaning out my garage over the summertime, and I came across a full set of tires on a car that I had sold a year ago. I guess there was a spare set of tires, and for whatever reason, I never sold these tires, the extra tires, with the car. So I had an extra set of tires there. Thinking, what am I going to do with these tires? I don't want to go on a Kijiji or anything else like that. So I just put them up outside the garage with a sign. I put down, here's a full set of tires, free. Free. And we live in a nice neighborhood. I thought, free tires, someone will drive by. They sat there for 3 weeks, and nothing happened. So then I just changed my whole approach. I changed the sign. I put down 4 tires, excellent condition, $100. And the next night they were stolen. I don't know. I'm not sure that I can actually depend on the weather. I do so much traveling. I actually got a break. There was a tour that kind of started to unravel for me, and it fell apart. And I told my executive assistant not to book anything. I'm going to take that week off. And my wife and I were going to go down on a trip down to Jamaica. So we're going to Jamaica in the end of the month, end of October. And I was always worried about the weather. And it used to be not that long ago where the weather, unless you're going on a vacation or you're working outside, wasn't really much interest to anybody. The weather came after the news. You'd watch the international news and the national news and the provincial news, but no one, you'd get up and get your coffee, your dessert, and you'd leave. No one cared the news unless you're going someplace or working outside. Now the weather is the news. It's the headliner, right? The headliner of the national news, international news, a whole station devoted to the news. And I thank God we live in Canada where we don't have things like tsunamis and earthquakes and volcanoes and that sort of thing. But having said that, we are experiencing in North America what I refer to as a silver tsunami. Now, it's not a weather tsunami, it's a demographic change that is actually occurring in North America. And here's what I mean by this, and it provides a nice little segue to this whole R word and what it really means to the boomers. The leading edge of the boomers turned 65 3 years ago. And on average, 1,250 people turn 65 in this country every single day. It's a lot of people turning 65. In fact, in 2 years, 2016, there will be more people over the age of 65 than there will be under the age of 14 in Canada. And that will stay that way for the foreseeable future. So here's a hot little tip on politics. When an MP or an MPP comes knocking on your door and said, you know what, we're finally going to do something about daycare. We're going to have the extra daycare sources, extra subsidies. They're putting money into something that they don't have to put a lot more money into because that's not where the real issue is. Now, the leading edge of the boomers turned 65 3 years ago, but the bulk of the baby boomers were born between 1961 and 1965. And that's why you think everybody in the world is turning 50. It's true. Because on average in North America, 12,500 people turn 50 every single day. 2,500 of them in this country alone. And it's part of a 20-year trend. So we're 3 years into a 20-year trend of people turning 50 and then turning 65. So small wonder that anytime you pick up a newspaper, read a trade journal, turn on the news, hear an interview, whatever, you'll hear something about this R word and what that's actually going to mean to those of us that are actually boomers or about to be boomers or perhaps have older brothers and sisters that are in that particular situation. Gerontologist Dr. David Demko actually coined the term Zoomer. It was actually grabbed by Moses Neimer a few years back to describe that group of boomers who are rejecting anything traditional about that R word that we're going to talk about this afternoon, because they feel that whatever the next 10, 15, 20, 30 years are going to bring, it's going to be very, very different than what their parents actually went through. And it is going to be very different, if only because of the sheer numbers of people hitting those magic ages. So I'll be spending a little bit of time with you this evening over the next 3 hours or so. That's how much time I had, wasn't it, Terry? You've got a long-running videotape in there. Going through this silver tsunami, what that actually means, a new retirement, the opportunity for you, because there are lots of issues that are going to be coming up that are going to be unique to us, and I'll cover some of that off, as well as really bring a call to action to this room this evening. A call to action to change your minds, maybe change your processes, your whole approach and your views about retirement, and however that you define that is going to impact your lives and how it will impact the lives of people around you. And then look at the importance of strategic partnering with advisors like the Zavitz team here, and why it's so important and valuable to identify someone who can actually take the lead in planning and recommending strategies and presenting to you with alternatives to deal with not just retirement planning, but of course estate planning, which is an integral part of that entire process. Here's what I found out in my studies over the years in dealing with an older demographic. Most people entering retirement have a pretty good idea about what they're retiring from. They do, but they have a very vague idea about what they're retiring to. They've got concerns about where they're going to live on a long-term basis. If they've been living in that two-story house with the washer and dryer in the basement, they're thinking, I'm not sure I want to do this 10 or 15 years down the road. Maybe it's time now to move in that sprawling bungalow or go to a condo or whatever. But I'm not sure I want to do all those stairs anymore. They're going to have a changing social role. A changing social role, if only because they're not going to be interacting the same way with all those people they spend 8 or 10 hours a day with. Yeah, it's great to say that we'll keep in touch. We'll keep in touch, not a problem. Not so much. It doesn't happen after a long time because your interests start to diverge. You find yourself out of touch with what you were doing for a living, for a career. And it's interesting enough as well is that when you actually talk to pre-retirees, they say that one of the things they'll miss most is the income. And when they're retired, what they end up missing most is the social interaction. Whether or not they're their friends, it's just that social interaction of clients and co-workers and whatever. So they've got changing relationships there. They've also got a changing relationship at home to the extent they've got a family, a significant partner. Now you're spending a lot more time, maybe too much time with that individual on a daily basis. So changing relationships at home and at work. You're now having to manage your personal time because you're going to have a lot more of it. And within that, having to try to find some type of happiness or self-actualization in those personal pursuits. I do a lot of work with business owners that are in their 50s and 60s as well. And I go through an exercise with them that I'm going to go through with you right now. And what I want you to do is I want you to write something down. Not the question I'm going to ask you. I want you to write down that this is probably the first time you've ever gone to a seminar where the speaker asked you to close your eyes within 5 minutes after he started. Yeah, I'm going to ask you to close your eyes right now. Everybody close your eyes and just listen to this question. Because this gets at the heart of one of the big issues around retirement. When who you are is defined by what you do, and you don't do that anymore, who are you now? When who you are is defined by what you do, and you don't do that anymore, who are you now? Okay, open up your eyes. See, that's the biggest issue facing entrepreneurs. It's the biggest issue facing most retirees. They know what they are right now, and they're almost afraid of letting go of what they're going to do right now. So they say, well, I'll just keep working, like forever. Part-time work, consulting work, because they've never really taken the time or effort to redefine who they're going to be, not for 10 years, like their parents, for 25, 30, 35 years, 40 years, because that's potentially how long they could spend in retirement. It becomes a big, big issue. So there is a fear then about retirement that does grip most Canadians, working Canadians, even as retired Canadians are actually leading pretty happy lives. And this is being confirmed by the annual RBC myths and retirement surveys that are being conducted across the country. What those surveys have found out over the last 3 to 5 years is that only about 38%, so less than 4 out of 10 Canadians over the age of 50 actually expect life to get better after retiring. They don't really have a positive viewpoint of what retirement is actually going to be like. Supported by a survey done by the Canadian Institute of Actuaries that found that 72% of working Canadians are worried about maintaining a comfortable standard of living in retirement. Now, it's natural to have concerns about retirement. And a major contributor to having those concerns is that fear, but it's a fear of the unknown. You don't know what's going to be ahead of you because you haven't defined it, haven't spent a lot of time on it. And that is tied to really having no tested roadmap that shows pre-retirees the path they need to take that will allow them to live out their dreams of a comfortable retirement. There is no roadmap. And I think working with an advisor, working with a team like the team that's invited you here this evening, can provide you some peace of mind and certainly a sense of preparedness. Because the vast majority of retirees who are having a successful retirement, and the number one reason is they had realistic expectations going into retirement. So someone spent time with them right now, going through what your expectations would be, and said, you know what, for the most part, my expectations are being met or surpassed. It ain't so bad. It's not so bad. But there is that fear. There is the old issue of fear, overreaction, market timing, and debt. And with fear, it's fear of the unknown. And it's no wonder why. The future is uncharted. There is no plan. And if there is a plan, it's never been stress tested to see if it actually works. Do the pieces fit together? And where are the holes? So let me ask you, who's got fire extinguishers? You have fire extinguishers? Pardon me? You got one. Anyone got more than one? Okay. Do they work? How do you know? Oh, okay.
And then replaced it.
And then replaced it? Does your one fire extinguisher work?
I just had it, bought a new one
Just
last year.
bought a new one last year. So you assume it works. You haven't tested it out, right? Okay. Has anybody spent a little bit extra money, got those fire extinguishers that have the little gauges on them? You think you're better off with those gauges because you say, well, it says green, it must work, right?
I just replaced one because the pressure was low.
Yeah. Even if the pressure is high, it says green. I want you to think of something that might have happened over the last 3 or 4 months where you're driving around town in your own car and you have a full tank of gas. Looks like, pretty much a full tank of gas. You run a couple of errands, you go to Shoppers Drug Mart, you go to the grocery store and a couple of rental errands. You're not driving around for an hour or two, but nothing really far. And you get back in your car again, you're down to half a tank. Has that ever happened to anybody? Like it just drops. Right? Sticky gauge, sticky gas gauge, very common in cars. Is it possible you could have a sticky gauge on that fire extinguisher? Do you know? It's possible. Yeah. Now you have one fire extinguisher, you said, right? Do you know that depending on the type of fire extinguisher you have and the type of fire you've got right now, the fire extinguisher you actually use could actually make the fire worse? You know that, right? Mm-hmm. So what you're told, I've heard some people say is, well, no, I had mine tested, had mine replaced, which is what you need to do, right? Twice a year, the fire department asks you to do something in your house, and it's coming up in a couple of weeks. What's that? Yeah, they didn't say test your smoke alarms. They said change all the batteries. Change them in 6 months, right? That's what they tell you to do. Just do it. Because once the flames are licking up around the side of the house, that thing was supposed to go off. You know, have you got that receipt, Mildred? Because I'm taking that back to Canadian Tire because it's not working. Right? It's too late. You want to stress test the solutions you put in place to make sure that they continue to do the job they were designed to do when you first set them up. You go through that stress testing exercise. But as I said, when it comes time to these plans, most people don't have a plan. If they do have a plan, they've never stress tested it to see if it actually works.
Have you tested your fire extinguisher?
Yes, I have. Yes, I have. Then we have that overreaction, which leads me to this, the emotional side of investing. And market volatility, which you've got right now, market volatility and unpredictability seem to be the new norms in the marketplace. Seem to be the new norms. And when you got that type of volatility, it increases the volatility of people's moods. My mood, your anxiety just goes up and down like it does with the market. And what's happening right now, it's impacting people's behaviors. And what's happening now since 2009 is most investors now are becoming much more reactive to the media. And by the media, I don't mean some guru in economics. I mean a headline, a little 10-second thing, and based on what you heard, read, thought, think you heard, you now make a trade. And most investors trade much more frequently now than they did prior to 2009. That's not necessarily a good thing. On a headline, nothing else. So that's a little disturbing. BMO did a psychology of investing report about a year and a half ago, and it found out that 28% of respondents said they were always in complete control of their emotions when they're making investment decisions. 4 out of 10 said that emotions do play a role when they're making investment decisions, and 60% admitted to impulse investing. About the same percentage as people that will admit to impulse shopping. It just felt good at the time, do it. No real thought, do it. And that is disturbing. Finally, we have this whole issue, because we know it's not market timing that's going to make anybody any money. It's time in the market that actually makes you money, like hang through it. The people that really lost their shirts after 2009 are the people that decided to buy high and sell low. They bought it in 2007. In 2009 said, I've had enough. And they crystallized their losses. They got out of the market and said, I'm not going to do that again until everything corrects itself. And then when the markets went back up to where they were in 2011 and 2012, now I'm going to get back in. They missed the entire ride back up again. So if you're going to a grocery store and you knew tuna is usually $2 a can, you say for 50 cents a can, you walk by and say, you know what, when it goes back up to $2, I'm going to buy some of that stuff. Is that what you do? No, 50 cents a can, and said, how much, is there a limit on how much? And you just load up your cart with tuna because it's on sale, which is what the market was in 2009. It was on sale. So if it had gone down, hold on to it. You should have stuck more money into it. And those that did made a killing in those 2 or 3 years because they bought it at that low price and rode it all the way up. But that's not what most people do. They miss out on that because of their habits. And then we're dealing with it now with Canadian consumer debt, which is pretty high now, about 160% of earnings. It represents the average debt that Canadians have. Fairly unsettling. Now, what surveys have also found over the last couple of years right now is that about 80% of people that have debt rank debt freedom as a top priority. In fact, a number of people over the age of 55 actually would think that it's their number 1 or number 2 priorities to be debt-free within the next 2 or 3 years, which is pretty good. The key really is to take some concrete steps to keep it under control and to have some contingency plans in place in case something happens and you leave somebody else holding that bag. Equally important is the fact, and this of course isn't going to be in the news, equally important is to recognize that debt to net worth ratios are getting better. What I mean by that, the amount of debt you had compared to how much you actually worth is getting better. So although the debt is high, what people are worth in terms of their investments, their houses, have gone up much faster than their debt has, but that's kind of bad news. And it bothers me that people actually have that focus because everybody's talking about the fact that you got middle income Canadians are in enormous debt. Let me ask you a question. Have you got a mortgage? You got a mortgage? Okay, let's pretend for a second this mortgage you've got is actually a floating rate mortgage. So you're paying, 1% on your mortgage payments right now. It's floating rate, which means at any point in time it can just go like that and go up really high. You're married, and you could actually handle the mortgage payments by yourself if the mortgage rate went to 4% instead of 1%. By yourself, you could handle that. Sure. Right now you're paying 1%. You could handle it 4% by yourself. Is that bad debt? It's not bad debt. Not bad. Anybody get a business owner in the room? Any business owners in the room? Okay, your business owner in the room. So you got a thriving business. Lots of extra cash flow coming in the butt. You don't even need all the money that the company is making, so you take out whatever you need and you just let the stuff sit there as cash. And you find out right now that one of your biggest competitors over there is planning on retiring. Has contracts and guarantees going in the next 3 years, also has excellent cash flow. You know that if you take over her business as well as yours, you'll own London. in terms of that type of business. You've got excellent credit rating, as does she. Lots of cash in the company, so do you. So you go out and negotiate a loan with a bank to buy her business. Is that bad debt?
No.
No, it's not bad debt. You see, what bothers me about the government is that if all debt was bad, then why do they continue to issue Canada savings bonds? Because you are investing in the national debt when you buy that, so they should lead by example and cancel all those issues and not do that anymore. See, all debt isn't bad, but the problem is they just say debt, it's high, it's bad. And the opportunity you've got right now is to spend time with your financial advisors and distinguish between the different types of debt, manage that debt, and have contingency plans in place in case something happens and there is that debt that's going to be there. Here's the number one question for you tonight. Number one question. Do you have a written plan forecasting income and expenses in retirement to ensure that you don't run out of money? Simple question. It's a yes or no. Number one question. Second question is, if you do have a plan, have you stress tested your plan to make sure that the structure of that plan, the strategies in that plan, and the solutions can continue to do the job they were designed to do when you first set them up? So you don't know it. So you may not have a plan, and you don't even know if it works. Or if it worked then, you don't know if it actually works today. You need to have positive answers to both of those questions. And you won't get that at the end of today, but maybe you'll get the motivation to get some answers after today. So what can future retirees expect? Well, we're going to live a longer life, much longer life. And hopefully be a longer quality of life as well. Much longer than I think we actually expect. Today's retirees will be in retirement for almost 3 times longer than previous generations. 3 times longer. And that changes the nature of financial planning, but it also changes the nature of lifestyle planning, because we are going to be in retirement far too long to just think of it as a long-term vacation. That's not what's going to happen anymore. And by longer quality of life, I mean that people will be active longer than expected, which raises issues about maintaining your lifestyle, the labor force, generational migration, staying healthy, getting fit, and those sorts of things. And the problem of retirement really is a balancing act between all those factors about how long your parents live and how long you think you're going to live, and what the tax rates are going to be down the road, and what your health is going to be like, and what that's going to cost, and is there government going to be around to take care of you, or should you start making some type of provisions to take care of yourself? You know, life is getting a lot more complicated. They say that, divorce rates are, all-time highs, no one's getting married anymore, but the fact of the matter is people haven't given up on love. Whether they're giving up on marriage, they're not giving up on love. And what we're seeing now is a huge boom in common law relationships. Between 2001 and 2006, these are the last years that we have statistics on that. There's supposed to be no ones coming out this year. Between the ages of 50 and 54, there was an increase of 43.5% in common law relationships. Between the ages of 55 and 59, there was an increase of almost 64% in common law relationships. And between the ages of 60 and 64, an increase of 71% in common law relationships. So that KISS formula, it's easy to deal with. My estate planning, my retirement planning, ain't so simple. We're dealing with people who are getting together later on in life, who have their own independent views on handling money, their own independent views and experiences of how life has treated them over the last 20, 30 years, and now they have to figure out some way of cohabiting and doing it on a regular basis. What happens to the respective children of those couples? I mean, what really was the deal when you and I decided to get married, and then you passed away from cancer, and we have 3 children. These are my 3 children right over here. Your name?
Ashley.
Ashley, Samantha, and Jocelyn. So these are our 3 kids. And the deal, you say, I know you're a younger guy. You might get settled again. You might get married again. But please, the things we build up together, I want our share to go to them, not to go to your trophy wife, who's much younger than you are, and then when something happens to you, goes to her children. It's supposed to stay in the family, right? So how do you make provisions for that when this is all so common? I think when I did that session on estate planning mistakes, I talked a little bit about the fact that, people don't have wills, or the wills aren't up to date, or they're not current, or they're invalidated. If you're in a common law relationship, do you know what you get when you pass away? If you're in a common law relationship and the will is invalid, do you know how much of the estate you're entitled to? Nothing. Even if the deal was this. The deal was, you and I decided to go get married. Actually, we decided to live together. And we didn't think we needed some stupid piece of paper to prove to the world that we were committed to each other. So we went out in the woods one day by a river, and we expressed our love for each other and that kind of stuff. And you moved in with me, and we celebrate that anniversary. And then we had a couple of kids. And 30 years later, that was a relationship, right? And I did a will. It wasn't current. Didn't do it up properly. And it was invalid. We have 2 children, 2 adult children. You get nothing unless you want to sue our children for some issues. You got to go get a lawyer. Yeah, you'll get nothing under the law. You have to sue to get something. Sue the estate and prove that you need some money, that kind of stuff, which means you're going to be taking the money away from the kids who are entitled now to everything. Now, hopefully the kids love you enough as a mom that that won't be an issue, but that's a situation which is an awkward situation to be in. And we're in the same, there are kids. You got a different issue because I'm now shacked up with her, and you're worried about what's going to happen to our 3 daughters. Different situation, right? What do I do in terms of disability planning, in terms of power of attorney? Who should be the power of attorney? Should it be one or more of my adult children, or does it now become my trophy wife? And how do adult children think about that? Here today, gone tomorrow. This is number 6, Peter. What's going on? So, that becomes a bit of an issue, or it can become a bit of an issue. So it gets back to planning and planning properly. Only 4 out of 10 Canadians know the amount of their future retirement income. I can give you the number. This is how much retirement income I'm going to get when I retire. Now, granted, as they get older, more of them know the number. And among people that high income, 6 out of 10 can actually give you the number. But that means even 4 out of 10 of the wealthiest families in this country can't tell you what the number is that they're going to get in terms of an income, which is bothersome. So affluence and assets are no insulation against not knowing the number, let alone not having a plan. And among affluent boomers, 3 out of 4 have no formal written plan for retirement. Absolutely none, even though they predict significant income declines and say, but I don't want my standard of living to suffer at all. How do you reconcile all of those thoughts? So it's no wonder that people are worried about retirement. No wonder they're worried about retirement. It would be no different than, what's your name?
Margot.
I can't see it. Margot? So Margot, it'd be no different than me asking you to come outside right now. We're going to go to my car. You can have a chaperone just to make sure nothing kinky is going to happen. Don't worry about it. So you can go along. Your name? Jeff. So you can come along for the ride. And Margot, we've been Facebook friends for a number of years now, so I've seen all these pictures of places that you would really like to go to for a long, long time. And you know what? I did some Googling and some research, and I found out the place where you want to go. It's Sandestin, Florida. That's where it is. So I'm going to take you up about 2 hours out in the country here, take an old dirt road, and I'm going to toss you the keys to a car that's parked on the other side of that dirt road. I got to tell you something about this car. It's got no gas gauge, no odometer, no speedometer. There's no GPS. No map in the car. Lights work, brakes work, that kind of stuff, but it's got no gauges at all. Yeah. No gauges. I grabbed some clothes. Jeff helped me pick up some clothes. Throw some clothes in the trunk right now. There's an extra gas can. You can't lift it out. See how much gas there is in the car. And I want you to start going out to Sandestin, Florida, right now. You don't even know where you are right now. Have a nice trip down to Sandestin. You going to get in that car? But most people would not get into that car. They just wouldn't do it. But that's the financial car most people are driving in life. They've got a car, barreling down the road while they're working retirement. They think they have a vague idea of where they want to go, haven't quite mapped it out yet. And they've got no map, no gas gauges, no odometer, no speedometer, no GPS. They've got nothing, absolutely nothing. And again, the value proposition is to hook up with somebody that can at least put you in a better car, or at least give you the gauges for the car so that you actually know where you're going. Because if you decide you want to stop somewhere along the line, and make a detour, they'll say, yeah, you can do that from here, like triptychs at CAA, make a side trip, go there and get back on track again. And eventually, in the next 4 or 5 days, you'll be okay. Bypass this area because there's constant construction, slow down here because there's an earthquake, there's a tornado coming through. Make those pauses so that you actually arrive at your destination safely. It's an issue. See, retirees right now have to choose from several different options about what they're going to do when they actually retire. When they're looking at all the assets they've got. One, they can withdraw earnings and interest only as needed, preserve their capital. Two, they can withdraw earnings and interest only and dip in the capital if they have to. Three, they can enroll in some type of a systematic withdrawal program. In other words, they're going to put all their money into different types of investments and just take out a percentage of it each and every year. Or the fourth thing they can do, because most people don't have pension plans, or if they do have small pension plans that may not be enough, they can pensionize or annuitize some of their income to give them that lifetime income. The question is, which one do you pick? 1, 2, 3, or 4? Which one? I make it relatively easy for you. Why are we even choosing? Most people actually choose between those 4. And I said, why are we choosing? Maybe for you it's 1 and 2. And for you it's 3 and 4. And for you it's 2 and 3, but only for the first 10 years. And then we've got to switch it to something else. Because life is going to change, isn't it? It's going to change. You need to have options in place that allow you to roll with the punches and a plan that's set up that says, I have flexibility here that can adapt to those changes if and when they actually occur. See, a lot of questions you're going to have at retirement. How long will my income need to last? How long does it need to last? How can I obtain a reliable income from my investments? What's a reasonable rate of return? What's my risk tolerance? What about inflation? And what do I do about minimizing taxes? Because I don't want all my income going to taxes and have nothing left over for me. Valid questions. And we do have to worry about outliving our retirement because we are living a lot longer. Now, what you'll hear typically, and I heard this from the media about 3 or 4 weeks ago, is they're saying, people are living a lot longer. When I say that right now, I said, yeah, okay, so like everybody knows that. So what you've been told and what you may have read is that people are living longer. Our parents lived to be about 75 to 76. Right now, males are living to be about 78 or 79, and females now are living to be about 82 or 83, right? Are those statistics you've heard, something like that? The problem with those statistics, it's measuring mortality, how long you live from the time you were born. And you shouldn't be looking at that if you're already 65 years of age, because the mortality tables completely change for people that are already 65. So for an average Canadian couple, Archie and Edith Bunker, do you know that couple? Archie, a little paunchy and doesn't get a lot of exercise. Edith is frazzled. She's having a nervous breakdown about every 20 minutes. I mean that type of a couple, not the super healthy people. Average couple. Archie has got a 1 in 3 chance of living to 90. Edith has got a 1 in 4, almost a 1 in 4 chance of living to 95. Not 79 and 83, 90 and 95. The odds are pretty high. On top of that, what a lot of people don't understand is that when I'm talking about life expectancy, how long you live, life expectancy does not measure the point in time that everyone dies. It measures the point in time, if they're all 65, that half of them do. The other half live longer than these statistics. So if you base your plans on life expectancy, or if you deal with an advisor who bases plans on life expectancy, you have a 50% chance of being wrong. Now me, I don't like those odds. Maybe you're a bigger gambler than I am, but I don't like those odds. Those odds don't really work. A coin toss as to whether I'm going to be right or wrong for the next 30, 40 years. So that really does bother me. So the new retirement, we have to deal about different types of risks, different types of considerations. Longevity risk is the fact that 1 in every 20 baby boomers today will live to be at least 100 years old. The fastest growing age group in Canada are people over the age of 85. In fact, 7 years from now, 25% of the population will be that age. They will be. We have more individual responsibility. Employer-sponsored defined benefit plans are not as common as they once were. They might be defined contribution, which means they define how much you got to put in. There's a guess as to how much you're actually going to get out of the plan, if you have a pension plan at all. So you may have to do that on your own with your own RRSPs or non-registered plans or investments or using creative types of life insurance or those sorts of things. You've got the issue about lack of preparation, and we've talked about then, the fact that many pre-retirees are still in the catch-up phase. In fact, when you look at surveys between males and females, it's kind of an even, more or less an even split in this room. Females actually have a few extra concerns. They live on average at least 5 years longer than the men. 2, their healthcare costs are going to be much higher. They will be. And 3, they either took time out of the workforce or they just had lower paying jobs, which means they haven't saved as much. So you're living longer, it's going to be a more expensive retirement, and you haven't saved as much. So if I was female, I'd be a little more worried than I am with a male in terms of preparation. Then you've got this whole issue of market performance. You know, it's been a pretty rough ride, and we're not going to go back to the good old days. Those are gone. It's going to be a little bit more volatile than it was before. And we've got demographic changes, because as the population ages, you know, traditional sources of retirement income that people counted on would be enough aren't going to be enough. Most people in this room can't survive on the Canada Pension Plan and old age security. It isn't going to be enough. You need more. And there's all kinds of new things you have to learn. Decumulation. That's the organized disassembly of your stuff. You put all the stuff together, and now in an organized way, you got to take it apart very, very carefully. The sandwich generation. Very, very real issue, the sandwich generation. Yell out the show if you can remember this. Maybe Andy Griffith's show? So we had Andy Griffith, we had Ron Howard, and we had Frances Bavier. That was the family. Frances Bavier played Aunt B. Remember Aunt B? She played a 70-something-year-old aunt that took care of Andy and Opie. How old was Frances Bavier 50 years ago when Andy Griffith's show was on in the early 60s? Do you know? She was 52 years old. You see, that's what a 52-year-old looked like 50 years ago. Now, here's the cruncher. Here's the cruncher about this thing about longevity insurance and the sandwich generation. 50 years ago, the average 50-year-old had one surviving parent. Today, the average 50-year-old has 3. 3 surviving parents when you hit 50, kids that are still living at home. You see, when I was 19 years old, going off to university, it was a badge of honor. It was expected that you would leave home. You're 21 years old, you still live at home? Come on. I don't care if it was a flea-bitten, rat-infested apartment, but it was your own place, and you had boxes and orange crates, but you lived on your own. Kids nowadays, they live home until they're 28. They have 3 or 4 kids. They're not married. And then they leave home for a couple of years. It's too expensive. They move back. So you got kids, grandkids, and then you got to worry about your parents. It is very much the sandwich generation. We're dealing with more complicated products. Products actually that are having to be adapted to not only provide you with insurance, but also investments. And the R word, I mean, what is that actually going to mean, the R word? Does it mean retirement? Does it mean unretirement? Does it mean rehirement, an encore careers, a reinvention? All kinds of things, very valid terms that we're going to have to be looking with. And part-time worker, a new career, might be a very, very active part, a very, very real part of this next set of phases in your lifetime. And it is a set of phases. It's not one phase, it's a set of phases with different priorities and different cash flow needs. And then the whole idea of longevity insurance, that's simply guarding against the risk of running out of money. So when do people retire? Key thing off this slide, almost half. 49% retire earlier than planned, earlier than expected. 22% of the time, their own health limits them from working any longer, they retire early. That 11% down there, most of that is the health of somebody else in the family. So typically about 1 out of 3 people that retire early because of health reasons. Yeah. I mean, sure, your clients can work longer, but a 2014 study found that only half of Canadians expect to be working at 66. And even though you may want to work, experience doesn't work in your favor. Because even though you may want to work, health may not be on your side, or the right sizing move made by senior management may prevent you from working as long as you actually live. 20% of retirees had as little as 1 month to plan for their retirement. 65% had less than 1 year to plan the next 30 or 40 years of their retirement. And if 1 out of 3 are leaving for health reasons, and remember, medicine's getting pretty good at prolonging people's lives. What are you doing to prepare yourself for a more expensive retirement? And if you're retiring earlier, it's also going to be a longer one. A longer retirement that's going to cost more money. What's your plan to deal with those realities? When it comes to planning and health, 74% of Canadians have no financial plan to fund long-term care and retirement. 74%, no plan. 82% say their personal finances would be affected if they developed a chronic condition. Now, chronic conditions, most people define it, is 3 to 6 months. But the average chronic condition in retirement is 10 years. It's not 6 months. So people think that my finance would be devastated. I'd really run up against it if I had a chronic condition that lasted 3 or 6 months as it makes some pains. If the average is 10 years, what's your plan? How are you going to deal with that? There's going to be a lot of issues with that. And 42% of younger boomers said that being a caregiver is something they had already done, they were doing it right now, or they fully expected to be doing it sometime in the near future. So significant increase in out-of-pocket expenses and stress levels are their options, because many will be supporting both a parent and a child in retirement at the same time. 80% of the caregiving is still voluntary. Most of it is done by women. The ratios are correcting themselves to some degree, but not enough. 2 million Canadians over the age of 45 are employed and caring for adults over the age of 65 who've got chronic health problems. How are you doing that? And yet, far from being financially rewarded, many caregivers are paying the price in terms of their own health and their own economic status. So working hours are reduced, and obviously deposits into retirement plans are also being reduced because you're not putting in that time. In fact, over her lifetime, the average woman today will spend more time taking care of an ailing parent than they ever did taking care of their children. More time. Now, the average 50-year-old today, women will actually have more husbands than children. Not that statistic. I said that at a conference about a month ago when a woman yelled up from the back of the room, "What's the difference?" I won't go there this evening. So let's talk about health risk management, because the 3 dominant concerns that retirees have are: 1, outliving their money; 2, spending it all on long-term care; and 3, being a burden on their family. And comprehensive retirement income planning incorporates health risk management to reduce or eliminate the use of your personal assets and your income to pay for health-related risks like a critical illness or long-term care. 2 is to protect the standard of living for both the client and the caregiver. So when we're talking about protecting income and assets and preserving dignity and preserving lifestyle, we're talking about doing it for both the client and the caregiver. This is a multi-generational issue that we have to deal with. And also, number 3 is also how to consider how to replace capital that is used to provide cash and income to fund healthcare costs. How do you replace that money down the road when you're going to need it yourself for your own retirement, or to provide an income or assets or some type of a legacy for either your spouse, your partner in your life, your children, or a favorite cause? So, we've got a rapidly aging population, a burgeoning group of people over the age of 65. Who's going to look after their affairs? Who's going to look after your affairs when you're over 65? Because most of us do not have 5 and 6 kids anymore. If we have any children, most of them do not live close to home. We've got bills, utilities, credit cards, leases, debts, pensions, retirement income, checks, support payments, investments, donations, disbursements. Most people do not want government intervention and control over their personal care. Most people do not want government intervention and control over their property and financial decisions. They don't want a public trustee or guardian. They want their independence. They want to maintain some type of independence, control over their own lives. And the preferences or fears may extend to certain people whom they do not want acting for them as well. So I don't want the government doing it, but there are individuals around the world here that don't want doing it either. So what do you do to not only provide the cash flow you need to take care of these situations, but also insulate yourself to making sure that whoever makes those calls for you and those decisions make for you is actually acting in your best interest, and that you'd be happy, just as happy as you can make those decisions yourself. So, what's your backup plan in case anything's happen? In fact, is there even a primary plan, let alone a backup plan, to take care of that? Because this forms an integral part of the overall deal. You see, you can either use cash to pay for this, you can redirect income that was supporting your lifestyle to pay for this, or you could look at another strategy or an income that, of course, this organization right here is very, very well equipped and well versed to talk to you about. And I'm sure that from some of you in the room anyway, that those conversations have already been held. So accumulation is very, very different from decumulation. Retirement income planning is very, very different from accumulation planning or savings planning. In fact, I draw a very, very big difference between retirement planning, in other words, planning for retirement, and retirement income planning, which is planning for the money coming out. So, what's your name?
Lee.
So Lee, when you're working, how many sources of income typically were coming in the door when you were working? One. Yours, right? Yeah. And for most people, they'd either say, well, mine, and if I was married, my spouse's. That'd be the source of income coming in. Now, like many people, if you'd made some investment decisions, you might have a little bit of dividend income coming in there, a little interest income, a little bit of capital gains from your investment portfolio. You weren't really using that on a regular basis to pay for your bills. It was what I would call, for most people, nuisance income. So if it came in, what you probably did with that is you probably reinvested it for the long term. Isn't that what you probably did? That's right, two sources of income. Now, I'm saying that accumulation is very different from a decumulation because we get to the spending years of your life. You don't have two sources of income, one or two. You're going to have 10, 15, 20 sources of income. You are. Yeah. Pension plan times two, Canada Pension Plan, old age security, RRSPs, a locked-in retirement account, mutual funds, segregated funds, tax-free savings accounts, GICs, term deposits, all that stuff coming in. It's all being taxed differently. It's all being reported differently. It's a lot more complicated than just saving for retirement. How to manage it, which assets do I use, which ones do I defer. Life can get pretty complicated. And what you'll find out as well is that all the things that made you so successful and helped you build all these assets, those concepts, those tools, those strategies either work differently or don't work at all when you're actually spending money over the long term. We'll all be conservative. It's got nothing to do with conservatism or picking the right rate of return. You're using a formula that actually doesn't work. It doesn't work at all. And that's what you got to think about. You have to think about the fact and remember the fact that new times do call for different approaches. When it comes time to looking at product solutions, they should help you, not hinder you from reaching your goals. So you as clients working with your advisors are very well served by documenting and understanding what the choices are that lie ahead, how and when those choices can be implemented, and when plans, certainly solutions, need to be adjusted because life is going to change, right? Your personal situation, your health situation, family dynamics, relationships, the tax environment, the markets, legislation, all that stuff is going to change. The last three I just mentioned have changed in the last year. What do you think is going to happen over the next 20 or 30 or 40 years? Will your plans and the solutions that your advisor recommended still work? Do you even know the answer to the question? You need to sit down with your advisors and need to regularly commit to going through what I call a financial fire drill to make sure those plans and solutions continue to do the job they were designed to do when they first set them up. And if they don't work, it was a fire drill. We can change the equipment. We can replace the equipment. And hopefully we build enough flexibility to be able to do that. So there are books, articles, and websites that tout this whole issue about how much is enough. What's the number I need? How much is enough? Well, I don't work for Sleep Country, so I can't tell you what your number is. Because it's not about a number. And the problem with this whole discussion is that the discussion tends to focus on what's the number I need to retire and what can I get for a lump sum. But what about the expense side? Shouldn't we have a different conversation? If you walk into me and you walk up to Terry or walk up to somebody and said, look, I think I've done the right things. I've got a will and a power of attorney, I've got an RSP, and I've got some locked-in accounts, got a tax-free savings account, I got some mutual funds, I got some segregated funds, I have some rental income, I got all this stuff coming in there, I've got Canada pension plan coming in there, got some old age security, I've got all this stuff coming in there. You know what I need to know? I need to know whether all this stuff I've got right here, including the wills and the trusts and the agreements I've got, will allow me to do the things I want to do for the rest of my life. That's what I want to know. Will this stuff allow me to do the things I want to do for the rest of my life? And the only way someone can intelligently answer that question is to ask you a question. They got to ask you this question. What exactly is it you want to do for the rest of your life? Because I don't know if this is going to be enough until you tell me what it is you want to do. And I mean, tell me what you want to do very, very specifically. Very specifically. And once I figure that out, and what that's going to cost, and all the things you've got to do, and add all that up, I know what the cash flow requirements are going to be. Then I'm going to match that up with the cash flow requirements come in there, and then I can tell you whether it's going to be enough. And then we can decide, or you can decide, what is it prepared to give up, or am I going to have extra dough, or extra cash? Because it is about cash flow. How much of that cash flow has to be guaranteed? Will that cash flow change over time, and your needs change over time? The answer is yes, your cash flow needs will change over time. And by the way, they're not going to keep going up. They won't. In the first 5 or 10 years of retirement, you'll spend money like drunks. A lot of people do. Do you know why? Because you have this bucket list of stuff that you want to get done. I said, why do you want to cram it all into 8 or 10 years? Why would you want to cram in all the things you want to do in the first 8 or 10 years of retirement? And what would you say? What would be one reason?
Well, I can, I have my health.
That's right. I've got my health and I can. I've got my health, my partner's life. I can do it right now. I don't know what's going to happen. So you cram it all in there right now. And once you've taken your 8,000th picture of an orangutan in Indonesia, you built your 4th school, dug your 15th well, walked Machu Picchu and the Great Wall of China and been to Australia and all that kind of stuff. Once you've done all that stuff, you say, now I'm going to settle down to a regular retirement. You know, spend time with my grandchildren and the cottage and my friends. Your expenses aren't going to be the same as that, not the first 8 or 10 years. And you'll do that along for 10 or 12 years, and then your life changes again. Your partner dies, chronic illness, you lose your driver's license, friends start dying off. You know, that old kettle works just fine. A little more duct tape around the handle, it'll be fine. You don't buy green bananas anymore. I mean, you know, you never know. You don't do that. It's good enough. The coat's good enough. It does. Your expenses just drop like this. And so you got to think about that all the way through and sit down with somebody who can have those conversations with you. So first off, you got to figure out, where are you in the retirement cycle right now? Where are you right now? What are your current data and reference points? In fact, what is it you want to do? When do you want to do it? Are you and your spouse, partner going to be retiring at the same time or different times? Are you going to retire in stages? Are you going to work right up to the finish line? Are you looking to start consolidating your assets? Are you going to have this part-time work going to be part of what you do? Like, lay all of that out. And as simple as this seems, it's basic to establishing how we're going to get to where we're going to go. You know what? In that little car scenario, I got to know exactly where you are right now. Now, give me directions on how to get to Sandestin, Florida. Well, where are you right now? Because I can't tell you how to get there if we don't know where you are. And then secondly, to figure out, what does this actually mean to you? What are your views of retirement? What role will work play in your retirement? What are your lifestyle and fulfillment goals? What are your family priorities and issues? Where are you going to live? What are you going to do with your time? Like, in detail, what is it you actually are going to do? And listening to your concerns then, in terms of what's important to you, in terms of broad themes. Is it liquidity? Is it the preservation of capital? Is it about having guarantees in everything you do in life? Is it about control, I mean in a nice way, or is it about leaving legacies? What's on your list? And not only is it important to figure out what's on your list, but what's the priority of the things on that list as well. Because if 10 years into retirement, I have to step in as your power of attorney, and we can't do all 5 of these anymore. If you prioritize them for me, I know which one to drop off the truck. If I don't, it's a guess, because I don't know what's most important to you. And if I'm going to do the best job for you, I need to understand this. If I need to understand this, you've got to tell me what it is, and you've got to write it down. And every now and again, look at it and said, have the priorities changed? Anywhere, is there something else that should be added on that list? You see, we're in the process, or should be in the process right now, of redefining ourselves. And I know what's important to most people as they get older. It's not about stuff anymore. We're moving from success to significance. That's really the end goal, one of the goals that they're having right now. You talk to people who are 75 or 80 years old and you give them the regrets, they never talk about it. It's all about, I should have spent more time doing this, I should have done this, I should have this, I should have done this. If we do it ahead of time, we'll make sure you get some of that stuff done, or as much of it done as possible. By becoming right brain and relationship focused, you're not going crazy. What typically happens as people get older, by right brain focused, I mean the following. Long-term memory, by the way, sits on which side of the brain? The right side of the brain or the left side of the brain? Someone yell it out. Do you know? Can't remember? It sits on the right side of the brain. Pictures, images, stories, visions, emotions sit on what side of the brain? Right side or the left side? The right side of the brain, same side as long-term memory. Logic sits on which side of the brain? Same side as short-term memory. That's why people can't remember ledger sheets and spreadsheets. It's logical, it's numbers focused. You're going to forget about that stuff. So again, you should demand and expect people to get very visual, pictorial with you. When you're doing this sort of thing, you'll make better decisions that you'll actually be able to remember for longer periods of time. And I get to the questions. We talk about things like retirement income planning. I have to ask this question. You know, of the part of your estate that you don't get to spend, where is it you wanted that to go? Now, there's a hidden assumption in this. The hidden assumption in this thing is that if you live long enough, you'll spend it all. So I'm not assuming you're going to give anything to anybody else. So if the part of your estate that you do not get to spend, where do you want that to go? And I'm going to give you a choice here. Your spouse, the Canada Revenue Agency, your children, other heirs, lawyers and accountants, favorite causes or charities, where do you want that to go? Just pick 2 off that list and we'll start our plan. Pick 2. You have to have a backup plan. Pick 2 off that list and let's build our plan. And while we are working, a good question to ask early on in the game is that, do you need an income from all of your investable assets? Do you? And if the answer is yes, then you might want to sit down with somebody and talk about an insured annuity strategy as part of the overall plan. If the answer is no, sorry. If the answer is no, then you want to talk about a personal or corporate legacy. I won't go into what these are right now, but these are great segues for you to sit down here with the Zavitz team and discuss how that might fit in with your overall retirement plan and the legacies you may want to consider leaving for favorite causes, children, and whatever. See, transferring your wealth, stuff you don't get to spend, what's changing right now between ourselves and our parents is that people think about estate planning and think about this is about all the stuff that happens after I pass away. You know, I have a will, don't have a will, set up a trust, and beneficiaries are going to get this. But what's happening now is people are now switching it from estate planning to legacy planning, and they're giving it away while they're alive. Keeping up with the Joneses, if you're the ultra-rich, is about how much you can give away, not how much you can accumulate. The whole thing is starting to change right now. It's about doing good and leveraging good. What is it you actually want to do? You're 81 years old, and you said it's all going to go to you anyway. Most of it's going to go to you. Why do you have to wait another 10 or 15 years before I go? You could use the money now. And that's what parents are doing right now. I said, well, I want to do that for you, but I want to make sure I'm comfortable. So they want to enjoy you enjoying it now. That's what's going to happen. That's the reality. But how can you have that conversation if you don't know what it is you need and you haven't put together any contingency plans for, well, what happens if I have a critical illness? What happens if I go to a long-term care facility? I need that stuff myself. You know, are there any other plans, any other strategies I can use to employ to give you a little more freedom to do what I want to do? Common estate planning mistakes, there's a whole seminar I can do this sort of thing, and I understand there's actually a seminar on this on the website. If you actually start the letter Z, and you go to there's a financial services organization that starts with the first letter Z that actually has this on their website. Go to that, and you can actually watch me doing this particular session. Tara talked about that a little bit later on.
Very good.
Yeah. So the most important thing that you need to take in financial planning is to determine what it is you want to do. What's really important to you? Is it safety of capital? Is it the need for regular income? Is it about minimizing taxes? Do you want to make sure you don't outlive your income? Do you want to leave something for somebody else? Do you want to just accumulate more wealth? And by the way, that's not such a bad thing. 30 to 40% of all the wealth you'll ever accumulate, you will accumulate after you retire because you're going to be retired for 30 or 40 years. It needs to last that long. You will accumulate more wealth, but the issue is, are you going to do that in a responsible fashion, or is it all going to get whittled away because you had no other way of paying for a long-term care situation or a critical illness, whether it was yours or it was somebody else in the family? So a lot of myths we want to dispel when we're talking about retirement income planning. The whole myth of saying that there's one retirement goal, I got to hit one magic number. It's about kicking out one income amount and just indexing it for inflation. It's a myth. It's about using one product solution. It's about all or one decisions. If I give them a choice of 4 things, I got to pick one off that list. Those are all myths. Retirement is an evolving concept with different stages and phases, with different income needs, with different cash flow requirements, which requires adjustments in your overall plan and your program. And income does not go up on an index basis. Adjustments and drops will inevitably occur. And within those plans, your cash flow needs may need to increase or decrease or whatever. So it's all about flexibility with balance through the various phases and stages of your emergencies. You know, when I mentioned earlier you have 10, 15, 20 sources of income coming in the door, that's not an unusual situation to be in. And one of the questions you need to ask is, okay, if I got 10 or 15 or 20 sources of income coming in there, which ones do I spend and which ones do I defer? Because if it, there might be an order that's better than the rest. There's a little game you can play right now. It's called Kwanzaa. Kwanzaa? Is what it's called? It's a game you play where you actually put together this structure. Kajanga. It's Kajanga. You put together this structure, and the game is you start pulling out the pieces. Anywhere from in there. And whoever pulls out the piece that collapses the balance is the loser. Well, think of that as being all your entire plan. All your stuff. Wills, powers of attorneys, and all your plans. Your insurance, that kind of stuff. You spent 20 or 30 years building that up. You want to make sure that it's taken apart in an orderly fashion. You're not taking off wrong pieces in the wrong order that can screw things up either now or mess things up somewhere down the road. So it's about flexibility with balance. It's about making sure that if you have a flexible source of income, you defer that. Because you know what? I bet you if I asked you what you want to do in the next 6 months, you could tell me what you want to do in the next 6 months. If I asked you how much you think that would cost, you could probably tell me what that's going to cost. And if I'm even a half decent advisor, I can put together an income plan that can give you that income for the next 6 months. What about 6 years from now? How comfortable are you about telling me what the expenses are going to be in 6 years from now? What about 16 years from now? What about 26 years from now? You see, when you're looking at which income source to use, why wouldn't you use the least flexible ones early and the most flexible ones down the road? Use the ones that are least flexible, you can't play with, you can't adjust them, you just come in, don't come in, no control of it. Get rid of those first. And the flexible ones are the ones you want to use down the road because that's when you need the wiggle room somewhere down the road. That is the opposite thinking that you'll get when you go down to your neighborhood bank. But that's the kind of thinking that's going to keep you out of trouble and allow you to live out the life you want whenever you want to do it on your terms. You see, finances and retirement are much more complex due to the uncertainty of death and the increasing possibility of large, unanticipated expenses like medical or long-term care. And it's quite different from your working lives, if only because of the different sources of income and the complexity of that income when it's coming in the door. So here are some strategies that we have to consider. What's going to be the impact of living a long, long time on my plans and planning assumptions? I better start checking and rethinking these assumptions I've been making and whether or not they're applicable. Now I know that this plan worked and that strategy worked while I'm saving money, but if I'm taking money out, withdrawing money, maybe I've got to change that strategy completely. And there are some changes that have to be made. I also have to stress test those assumptions. I've got to stress test my plans. I've got to stress test my product solutions under various scenarios to make sure that they continue to do the job they were designed to when they first set them up. And call my advisor on the table and said, and it better work. If it doesn't work, you give me a plan B. You give me another option. Canadians' views on ideal retirement products and solutions is different. It's changing very, very rapidly. And it's good to say that if I've got regular cash flow requirements, why wouldn't I have regular income requirements coming in, income flows coming in there to take care of that? If I've got flexible needs for cash, why wouldn't I have an investment plan that's flexible to take care of that as well? And why would I want to pay for cash on the barrelhead for when something goes wrong? Why wouldn't I pass that risk on to somebody else? This is really about optimizing what you want. And it really is a call to action really for the advisors that invite you to this session right now to make sure that not only you but they have a bigger awareness and a better awareness of the issues that are unique and significant to you. To help you really define what it is you want to do and why. And to really create freedom by setting up structures. People think when I set up a structure, it's going to be confining. The structure is going to give you the freedom to do whatever you want to do, whenever you want to do it, to help you truly live out your dreams. Really, this whole issue about the future, it is getting a lot closer than it appears, just like that side view mirror. And it's about getting involved, actively involved in your own process right now, and getting comfortable and getting immersed in what I will call strategic dreaming. Dr. Richard Johnson is a gerontologist, fellow gerontologist. He said he did 20 years of research on the factors that contribute to success in retirement. He found out there are 15 factors that contribute to your success and the happiness you feel in retirement, and only one of them is financial. What you need to figure out is what the other 14 are for you, and to make sure that the finances are going to be in place to help you live out those other 14 things. So,